Good afternoon. I will call to order this meeting of the Professional License and Subdivision of the Committee on Regulated Industries. I'm going to ask everybody to take just one moment and in your own way invoke God's blessing on what we do here today. Let's do that now. Thank you for that. We have two bills that we're going to consider today. Both of those, Representative Washburn, thank you for giving us some business and a reason to be here today, Representative. There's not anything else we need to do before we ask him to present. Yep. Representative Washburn, if you would, let's start with House Bill 34, if you'd come and tell us about it.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm honored to do business with you. I can think of no one else I would rather do business with on this afternoon than you, Mr. Chairman, and your committee. We've got this bill, House Bill 34, the most significant thing we should say. This is a bill that assists the Secretary of State's office in our licensing process. As we all know, we've had some issues there. The most significant thing is this bill passed last year out of the House and went to the Senate and was waiting to be called in the Senate and didn't get called in the rush of the end of the session. So the bill was passed out last year and clearly vetted. Basically, this is just enables, or it gives statutory authority to enhance the license renewal process by providing an online solution and requiring that licensees have to use that solution to track their CE requirements and their CE as they get the CE that they need to get their licenses renewed. Gabe is here with the Secretary of State's office. He is the expert on this, but I'll certainly entertain any questions and let Gabe respond as needed.
Are there questions from members of the committee of Representative Washburn? I don't. Yes, I do. Who's number 14?
Yeah, we were just discussing line 13, 32 and 33. Nothing in this subsection shall prohibit a professional licensing board from granting a hardship waiver or imposing additional penalties as otherwise provided by law, rules, and et cetera, et cetera. Just want to consider that word hardship, if that might be become problematic. Would you consider striking hardship and just having it read, nothing shall in this subsection shall prohibit a professional licensing board from granting a waiver or imposing a penalty, so that doesn't become something they have to wrestle with when they're doing it?
Well, I'm certainly here at the pleasure of the chairman and the pleasure of the committee. I probably would like to give Gabe a chance to respond to that request, if the chairman doesn't mind, to consider that.
I'd be glad, and we're going to invite him to come and make any other comments he wants in just a moment.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Are there other committee members that have comments? Gabe, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This bill did pass, as Representative Washburn pointed out, I think with one no vote in the House with the current language. And the hardship language is there for a specific purpose. And it's kind of a common sense language. If we put in there at basically the discretion, from our point of view, it gives the board way too broad of authority to get out of having to do this kind of work, potentially. And some of the situations have been described to me as broken leg, family member sick. Those are all obvious hardship situations here. And the intent of this bill is not to find a single supplier. It's the intent to make every profession use some kind of tracking system. And one of the big advantages for our office is right now by law, we have to do audits, and they're manual audits of looking at continuing education. We can do up to 1 to 3% of the licensees. That takes a lot of time for our analysts, so we'd rather than be working on getting out licenses. When y'all pass this bill, which I'm prayerful that you will again, we will have a 100% audit because it's being tracked internally and verified as they go. So we know if it's in the system, they have done their continuing education, we meet that legal requirement, and it doesn't require work on our end. That's the most important part about this. It frees up resources and allows our analysts to do the work they need to do to get licenses issued. Does that basically answer your question?
That does answer my question, but I guess the definition of a hardship, what is that?
Sir, I'll leave that to the board and the common sense. I understand, but if we make it just discretionary, that is, from our point of view, far too broad and would allow people to, for whatever reason they want, avoid having to do this work, which would then potentially put the work back on our analysts. We think for most people, a hardship kind of makes sense. If you get in a car accident and you're out of work for 6 months, that's a hardship. If you are late for a bus, that's not really a hardship. You put it off to the last minute. So we think the hardship gives enough there, and I know there are other people who disagree, but this language did pass last year this way. This wasn't really a big argument last time, and we haven't seen that in the real life because we do have CE tracking now for several of our boards, and I think we have 4 different ones that do it. CE Broker is the biggest one, and then you have one for the optometrists, one for the architects, and one for the used car dealers, and they're all separately done, but the outcome is the same for our analysts.
So you're worried that could give the board too much latitude?
Yes,
that
sir.
they would abuse that discretion if they were given it?
Yes, sir. And I have a history of boards taking as much latitude as they possibly can, meeting late, putting off. I mean, our job is to get people to work. Doing this kind of latitude could get in the way of us getting people to work. That breadth of latitude, yes, that is our concern, administratively.
Let me express my own concern about putting that word in there is I hate to see a board sit there and get in a debate about what is a hardship, and they grant that waiver one time because it's a hardship, and the next time they don't, and the argument's made, well, I have a hardship also. If we don't trust these boards to do the job, we're in a lot of trouble, aren't we?
I would agree, and I don't disagree with that statement.
Thank you. Do you have any other comments?
We would appreciate your passage of the bill as written.
Thank you. Let's see, I think we have Tom Davis. Is it Tom Davis? Is that right? Yes. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Tim Davis. I represent the Georgia Nurses Association. We are one of the professional associations under the purview of the Secretary of State that does have a benefit of being able to use a third-party repository for our continuing education like this. Nurses overwhelmingly support this program. They tell me all the time that it's very easy for them to use, very easy for them over a 2-year process towards relicensure to track where they are and the number of continuing education hours that they have. You may ask the question, well, if nurses can already do it, why do we care? As Mr. Sterling alluded to, allowing for all of their licensed professions to be able to utilize systems like the nurses already do will allow them to free up manpower for them to focus on helping professions just like ours get through the relicensure process in an expedited and fast manner. So I would ask for your favorable consideration for the bill as written at the appropriate time, and happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Members of the committee, are there questions? Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Lemke, Mr. Valines, Aubrey Valines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. We appreciate Representative Washburn and Mr. Sterling working with us on this bill. We have one suggestion, and that is to strike the word hardship, and I'll tell you our reason for that. We do trust the boards, and we think it should be discretionary. We don't want to have them debating what's a hardship or not. We've had people that had heart attacks, family members fell and broke their hips. We've had people who just were negligent and thought that the package they were taking in in December included the 1 hour of jurisprudence they had to have to renew their license, and then they found out it didn't have it, they'd have to come to me at my office and get an hour of jurisprudence in January. The optometrists, for example, have a 30-day grace period, whereby if you haven't finished your CE or whatever, you missed whatever, you got 30 days after that as a grace period. This would wipe out that grace period. What happens if COVID comes again or something else like that? I know the last section said the board can make rules and regulations to carry out and make necessary changes. You can't make a rule or regulation to change a law, and this is a law. So they can't change any of that. We think the board should have the discretion. I can't tell you how many examples. I can give you just tons of them. I don't want them debating whether it's a hardship or not. Trust your board, because your phone's going to ring. And when they lose that license and it's not renewed, this is a 12-page document to fill out to get reactivation. Have to get records from other states if you're licensed in other states, have to get all kinds of stuff. It's not a matter of, here's my CE, give me a license. If your license has been revoked for non-renewal, you got a process you have to go through.
Members of the
Thank you.
committee, do you have questions of Mr. Valines? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Would you like to come back and please do that now?
Just following Mr. Valline's points, there's a standard 30-day late renewal period that's across the board for every single trade that we have already. So this would not get in the way of that. The making of rules around the law is a standard practice that boards would always engage in. The intent here is to follow common sense. And are we saying that every single board is going to abuse this? No. Are there going to be individual ones? Potentially. Everything he just said is not something to argue about a hardship. I think the vast majority understand those are hardships. And like I said, the 30-day window remains the 30-day window. The only time you get canceled is if you miss your 30-day window and you miss your CE and you miss this. Part of the reason for having the CE tracking is so you get constant reminders that you have 6 months to finish this, you have 3 months to finish this, you have 1 month to finish this. For the boards that don't have that, that is a real issue. For the ones that have the tracking, they don't have those kind of issues unless somebody is really operating outside their bounds. So I think that the horror stories as outlined there are not very likely, and this is going to help us all do our work better and those licensees to get their licenses and keep them in good standing moving forward.
Representative Hurt.
Sterling, I just want to back up on something you said. Maybe I didn't hear you correctly. If you could just clarify for me. You said boards all the time make rules around the laws. What do you mean by that?
I mean, based on the laws. They make them around the laws to clarify and do those kind of, that's the standard rulemaking practice. That's what I mean, not to get around the law, but to follow the law.
I wasn't sure what you meant.
I have one. I have a question. If you look at the bill beginning on line 29,
If somebody can hand me the bill, it'd be great. Yes, sir.
it clearly says a professional licensing board shall not renew a license until the applicant has complied with all applicable continuing education requirements. There's nothing that gives any kind of grace period in there.
Well, you can't get a license at all now if you haven't completed your continuing education. That's what the law basically says in these situations. What he's talking about there is we have what we call a late renewal period for 30 days before you would get your license canceled potentially by failing to do so.
But this says the board shall not renew it.
Well, they can't renew it now if they don't have their CE done. That's the law as it sits today. So this is just reiterating that same thing. So the use of the CE tracking is to help that licensee and to help our staff. So there's nothing in here that changes the fact right now that there's a 30-day late renewal period. They call it late lapse renewals, where they can still do their work and get this done. If you don't complete your CE, you cannot renew your license, period.
So you tell me what happens the day that license actually lapses and you go a period of time without it, but you've got that period of time to renew it after it has lapsed?
The 30 days, because after that, you'd have to file for a reinstatement, which is the law now.
Yeah. But during that 30 days, you would not have a license.
No, you would not be able to practice during a period, but you're allowed to do it without having to do reinstatement.
I understand.
Which depends, again, our systems are different now. You don't have to do a 12-page situation. You don't have to go back and get everything's being held in the goals documentation portal. So it is not the nightmare scenario as outlined by the previous speaker.
Okay, thank you. Members of the committee, do you have any questions? Thank you. Here's our posture. We are ready for a motion, and then we can go to discussion. Isn't that proper? Yeah, so if there's a motion, then members will have an opportunity to discuss and talk about amendments.
Motion to pass?
Have a motion do pass, a second. Motion and a second do pass. Discussion, members. Yes, sir.
So the very foundation of this whole system are these licensing boards, and I just feel that if that we should trust and empower them, and if they are not worthy of our trust, then and there is no mechanisms to fix that, then we need to work on that too. But ultimately, without trust and empowerment of these boards, that's just the foundation of the whole system. So I just, on line 33, I want to, at the appropriate time, I'll make a motion to remove hardship, just to allow these boards more latitude to do their jobs. And again, the legislature meets every year. If we have boards abusing their discretion, and I think we certainly need to deal with that as well, but that's a separate issue.
Is there any other discussion? He actually hadn't moved the amendment yet.
Yeah, just discussion, I guess, at this point.
Okay, since there's no discussion, the chair would now entertain a motion do pass as amended and state your amendment.
So at this time, I state my amendment? Okay, I got you. Okay, so I propose that we amend line 33 by striking the word hardship from that line, and the rest of it remain the same.
Is there a second to that? There is a second. Any other discussion? We're ready for a vote. All members in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed will say no. The ayes clearly have it. The bill has been amended. Now, is there a motion to pass House Bill 34 as amended?
Motion to pass?
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Mr. Washburn, you have your House Bill 34 go into the full committee as amended by this subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Now, Representative Washburn. This other bill's a little heavier.
It is. I was just thinking that this much discussion on 2 pages,
You want to tell us where we are on this bill, and let me suggest this. If you're going to bring us what you want us to consider as a committee substitute, why don't we just go to that and you tell us that you want us to consider your revision as a committee substitute.
But it just came in.
I'm 8:11, that's plenty for now. Okay, I gotta go back, because I gotta do a conference call.
All right.
Excuse me, I'm trying not to take out the flashlight.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Washburn, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This bill is another situation of a bill that passed the House last year and got to the Senate and then did not get out. So it was passed last year, almost identical to what we have, but we do have another couple of minor changes, and I'm going to ask Lee Lemke, who is the expert on this, to come and help us with understanding that. And Lee asked me to carry this bill. I'm honored to carry it. And we had another gentleman carry it last year who's no longer in the House. For the most part, this bill is a long bill, as has been stated, and it deals with it deals with electrical contractors, plumbers, and HVAC contractors. Largely, it is a big cleanup bill that Lee, on behalf of these folks he represents, has asked us to do. For instance, if you look through it, you'll see a lot of things, like on line 95, low voltage is replacing low voltage with a hyphen. And so there's a lot of wording cleanup and things like that. There are a couple other things that I'm going to ask Lee to address because they're a little more substantial than that, and you do need to know about that, and that is what is in this substitute that you were just handed. So, Lee, if you don't mind, would you address that?
Representative Washburn, before you leave, let me give these members an opportunity to ask you questions if they have any.
Sure.
I don't see any, so the chair's going to recognize Mr. Lemke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and representatives. Thank you very much. This bill is actually 4 years old. It is the same legislation that was brought by the chairman of the 5 boards. And his name is Roland Weekly. He couldn't be here today. But Roland was the one that orchestrated this and put it together to make it more uniform with the 5 trades. And that we have the utility contractors, the utility contractors, the plumbers, the electricians, and the low voltage folks. So there's 5 groups that are engaged in this bill, and again, it's mostly cleanup, even though it's 45 pages. The biggest aspect of it that I feel in this bill that was so important, and why it passed the House 2 other times, but it just unfortunately did not get through the Rules Committee of the Senate last year. The biggest thing is if someone dies and has a contracting license, they already have contracts that are ongoing. Well, this would allow them to have 90 days to get another registered licensed electrician or plumber. But plumbers are not licensed. Plumbers have journeyman or master plumbers, so it's slightly different than the other 4. But anyways, that's the important part, so they can keep operating, and that's one of the aspects to it. There are some other little nuances with each group that are in here, pertains to each group. I should mention that, and in the audience we have Tucker Green, represents the air folks. We have Rhonda Chanham, who represents, in her or association with rural telephones, has low voltage activities that they do. Low voltage is the stuff that deals with security alarms and smoke detectors, things like that, that don't have the electrical side where you have to have an electrical license. But low voltage does have a license, but she will be exempted from that group in this new legislation. What else can I say? Did I miss somebody else? Joel Wiggins is also representing the electrical contractors. I represent the Atlanta electrical contractors. He represents the independent electrical contractors. So we have a whole group of folks that are actively working on this legislation, and it's important to a lot of key tradesmen in the state. So that's why we're bringing it before you.
Questions from members of the committee?
Yes, I appreciate you bringing this bill. You say it's like 4 years in the making. What's what the problem is in the Senate? Have we got that worked out?
It was just a nuance with the way our representative had voted on another bill.
Gotcha. Okay.
Any other questions from committee members? Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
Members of the committee, we're going to do this rather informally. This is a lengthy bill. We know how important it is to move these things along as rapidly as possible, and I would like to see us move it on to the full committee. But I'm going to give you the opportunity to talk about with a bill this long, whether or not you're comfortable doing that here today. If you want to have a hearing only and come back, I would hope that we can move it forward. But if you're not comfortable with doing that, if you tell me that, I'll be guided by that. Yes, sir.
Representative
Representative Earhart.
Just confirming, this is the one we heard this last term. Yeah, okay. Mr. Chairman, I would say, given the fact that we have heard this bill before and that this, our colleague here has certainly explained the differences and updates to us, I see no reason why we can't move this along, and at the appropriate time, I would like to make a motion to pass.
Thank you very much. Now, we're working on a substitute that the author has brought to us, so I think procedurally we'll take a motion. If the motions do pass, then we'll have an opportunity to adopt this new version with the LC 550466S. Then I'll give you an opportunity to make the motion to adopt this committee substitute. So the chair would now entertain a motion. Do pass. Yes, sir.
I will give you whatever motion you're asking for,
Do pass.
for the substitute.
No, I do.
You got to do pass for the bill. That's,
She did a motion. She didn't.
Okay, well, we did.
I said at the appropriate time, so we need to make it official.
It is appropriate time. Is there a second?
second.
Okay. On the motion and the second, all in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Now we're open for discussion and a motion to adopt a committee substitute, which is LC 550466S. Do I have that motion?
I so move.
We have a motion and a second.
Second.
All those in favor will say aye. Thank you very much. We have adopted the committee substitute. Now do we?
Now you have to pass the bill as a whole. I mean, at that point, you adopted the substitute, so you have to pass the bill, the committee substitute.
Okay. Now a motion.
The motion's already on the floor, so you just have to take the vote now.
Okay. A motion is on the floor, and the vote would be to adopt, to pass the committee substitute onto the full committee.
Mr. Chairman, I vote to pass
Okay.
on to committee.
All, we got the motion. Say, all in favor will say aye. Aye. This bill, Mr. Washburn, will go on to the full committee, and thank you very much for your work on this and for getting everybody in agreement. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your flexibility. I know that the late committee substitute, and we have had a number of folks working on this representing the different interests. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members of the committee, y'all have anything further? I hear none. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, sir, and I'll make sure the substitute gets over to the full committee. Awesome. Thank you.
You got a copy of it?
One of these days I'll learn this, man.
It's okay. I just sometimes don't pay as good with attention exactly where we are, who moved and who did. But I used to do this a lot.